Thank you all so much for joining us today. I've been looking forward to this exact conversation for a few weeks now because I'm joined by two of the absolute best professionals in the media business and the sports business, and it's just a coincidence that they happen to be women. But I'm so grateful for your time. So please help me in welcoming Stephanie McMahon, Chief Brand Officer for the WWE, and Erica Nardini, first CEO of Barstool Sports. Thank you guys for joining me today.
Thank you.
I've been saying this at every panel that we've had, that it's almost, it's exciting that we're here, that we're all together, but there's obviously a lot of conflicts happening around the world. And so thoughts and prayers with everybody over in Ukraine. But I wanted to just kick it off by addressing it. The WWE has paused a lot of programming in Ukraine. Wanted to just ask you, Stephanie, about that decision before we get into some of the more fun stuff.
Sure, and we actually did more than just pause it, we just shut it down. So on March 3rd, we shut down our partnership with our broadcast partner in Russia, and WWE Network is no longer available there.
And when you think about making those kinds of decisions, whether it's Ukraine or it's another social good situation, how do you make those calls? Is it something that you do intuitively? Is it something you work with on your board and you think about PR? What goes into a decision like that?
Well, I think there's a lot of factors to consider, and it depends on every situation, because every situation is different. There's not a rule book, and you have to do what's right for your company and your brand, and if you can be helpful. Again, it depends on what the situation is. So in Saudi Arabia, for example, WWE produced our programming and put on live events in the region. And we have now had not one, not two, not three, not four, not five, but 6 women's matches in Saudi Arabia. And even our women in the main event were on billboards in Riyadh and Jeddah, which, is a first time. So that was, another decision that we made to stay and to try to be a part of making change. So I think, every situation, every case is always different.
When we're thinking about making change, there's one, the role that your company plays in the decisions it makes, but there's also the role that a company plays in activating its community to do good. Erica, we talked about this before. During COVID, Barstool had a Barstool Fund, raised $40 million for small businesses.
Which is amazing.
It is amazing.
Thank you.
And now that COVID is not in the rear view, but receding, how are you thinking about moving that effort forward going ahead?
Yeah, the Barstool Fund was a very, I would say, prototypical Barstool experience. Dave Portnoy tweets something out. We want to help small businesses. We had over 200,000 people give money. In under 4 months' time, we raised over $40 million, which is pretty unheard of. What was then unheard of was that we built the right infrastructure where we got that money to people within 3 days of accepting their grant. And typically, one of the things that was very difficult for small businesses during the pandemic was that the grant process was extremely arduous, and it was taking so long to get approved that the clock was ticking for a lot of businesses, and we were able to step in and help. What we're doing now is we're moving the fund even beyond small business and COVID. And what we call it is the Barstool difference. So typically when you hear the word the Barstool difference, it's what people say when we screw something up. So the tech doesn't work, somebody flubs something, we screw something up, which if you follow Barstool Sports, you'll know happens a lot. When we do that, our fans would say, oh, that's just the Barstool difference. And I think the Barstool difference is actually what made Barstool matter from the beginning, because it was the way that we were real. Like, you saw what was happening behind the curtain and in front of the curtain at the same time. And now we're going to take that to what we're doing for social good. So it's not just about COVID. It's not just about small business. It's not just about charity. It's about taking 153 million people who follow us and engage with us every single month and mobilizing them to action. So I care about women in business. Women-run businesses were disproportionately affected by the pandemic versus male-run businesses. I run a business in a male-dominated industry. I want to help other women in my shoes be able to beat the pandemic. So we're raising funds, we're seeking applicants, we'll put that into motion. We'll do the same thing around the veterans community. We have a killer podcast called $1 Million Worth of Game. They're focused on inner city Philadelphia youth. We'll focus there. We've got a personality who is a recovering alcoholic and wants to create scholarships so that other recovering alcoholics can go to rehab for free. So those are the type of initiatives we're going to bring forth, and it's our way of doing good, not just because we should or because we have to, but because we want to and because it means something on a personal level.
I'm glad you brought that up, because while we're here talking about innovation, I think one step of progress for the industry has been, how do you innovate with a community? And bringing them together through philanthropy is one way of doing that. How do you think about this at WWE? Is this something that excites your community? Do you feel like you can engage in the same way?
So I'll give you an example. And we have 4 key pillars to giving back, and they are inclusion, service, hope, and empowerment. And not just women's empowerment, but empowerment for families. And we work with UNICEF, Boys and Girls Clubs of America, GLAAD, Make-A-Wish Foundation, on and on. So many different incredible partners, and every cause is worthy. So what's the strategic alignment? How can we activate our audience? And I can give you so many examples of how much our fans, I think it's so important because there's so much content out here. There's so many different opportunities for people to choose where they're going to spend their time, where are they going to spend their resources. And when you provide them with something extra, something that they believe in, that they care about, not just great content, but they're a part of that movement then. So Connor's Cure is a fund that my husband and I started. My husband is also part of WWE and a WWE Hall of Famer in his own right, Triple H. Life imitated art, long story. His name is Paul, if you hear me reference it. But at any rate, so Paul and I fell in love with this little boy who was a WWE fan who unfortunately lost his fight to cancer, and he was 8 years old. He was the same age as my daughter when it happened. And we made a promise to him, and we started this fund that now sits with the V Foundation. And let me tell you, our fans all around the world support Connor's Cure. I see these bracelets support Connor's Cure. I've run into people in the airport in Dubai wearing these bracelets. It's really amazing. We did a partnership with Hyundai for their Hope on Wheels initiative, which is incredible. They've raised hundreds of millions of dollars for pediatric cancer research. And we brought out 2 of their youth ambassadors to come to the ring at the time. They're both survivors. Their names were Elizabeth and Carter. And we gave them championship belts because, you know, they deserve it. God knows if they were ever champions, they are. And our audience jumped to their feet and started chanting, "You deserve it." I mean, and that's who our audience is. You know, they're so supportive of every cause that we're involved in because it matters to them, it's meaningful to them, and especially Connor because he was one of them, right? So
I think this trend that both of you are speaking to is you've been able to curate these incredibly engaged audiences so that when you go to invest in philanthropy, go to do something as a movement, your audiences are really excited about. But I want to talk about your audiences in a different way. Obviously, you know, Barstool targets a very young audience, men and women. WWE targets a little bit of an older audience, but you guys are also expanding into so have long been the pioneers in streaming. What do you think about leading those types of companies as women? And why aren't more women leading these types of companies? I'll start with you, Erica.
I mean, I love our company. Like, I love this job. I love Barstool Sports. I'm so proud to work here. 1, because we have a really young employee base, and 2, the chance to be part of culture and to make products and content and systems that work in today's culture and help make culturally relevant moments, shows, people, personality, products, you name it, is truly a luxury. Truly a luxury. I wish more women ran businesses like mine. And I think they should, and I think they will. And I think that's really important. I don't really think about my gender at work. Barstool's oddly the least sexist place I've ever worked. I've worked at big companies, I've worked at startups. The great thing about Barstool Sports is it's kind of come as you are, and bring your weird brain and bring your ideas and bring what you got and be willing to take some flack for it, but use that stuff, you do you, bring what you got. And I think that's really inspiring, and I think it's really empowering. I think what's hard for women right now is when you're forced into a system, or you buy into a thought system of you should be this, or you should do that, or you should take this risk, or you shouldn't take that type of risk. That's when women get really stuck and limited, and then you bring life pressures and financial pressures into that, and it's hard to rise to the top. So, I feel like the work Stephanie and I do, and Stephanie's entire team and my entire team, it's a luxury. Like, working in the content business, this conference is such a luxury, the creative industry. And I think we feel very strongly that we have a responsibility to show that you can do it. You don't have to be perfect. You're not going to have it all. You're going to have it all. You're going to have nothing. You're going to have everything in between. You're a great example of that. And hopefully there'll be young women who, go to the university or who are watching this or who are in the audience who say, like, maybe I can have my dream too.
I'm sorry, Sarah, what's the name of your podcast?
Great call, Stephanie. So I have a podcast called Token CEO. So,
sorry, Sarah.
Okay. Do my job for me.
Stephanie will do your part and mine. But I called it the Token CEO because when I got to Barstool, and everyone who hated on Barstool, what they liked to say was that I was just here because I was a woman, because I was a skirt, and I basically would make Dave look good and be quiet and go sit at the corner and get trotted out for press events. And I think one of the greatest things that I've been able to do here is to take that and make it my own. So something that started as a criticism of me is now my brand platform. And I hope everyone can do that everywhere.
I want to follow up before I get to Stephanie's answer to this on something you said about Barstool being like the least sexist place you've ever worked. Obviously, that is a striking comparison to what's happening with Dave. He has sued Insider for reports of sexual misconduct. And how do you deal with addressing those types of reports as a CEO, but feeling the way that you do?
Yeah, I feel Dave Portnoy is the single best person I've ever worked with. I love working with Dave Portnoy, and I'm grateful for it. I've learned so much from him. I think he is exceptional at what he does. I also feel that, we're a company that eats other people's lunch and does so fairly arrogantly and quite often. And so we have a very, very large target on our back as individuals and as a collective. And when you look at what's happening with Insider isn't the first company to come along and criticize Barstool Sports. People have been criticizing Barstool since well before I got there, and will criticize Barstool far, far after I'm gone. What's hard in this case is that I think there's shoddy journalism at play. There's obviously now a lawsuit with Insider for defamation. And it's also, when you think about the boundaries of what happens at work and what happens in someone's personal life, that's a tricky place to be for the person and for the company. I don't want to, as the CEO of a company, to be governing what happens in the bedroom of people who work for Barstool Sports, so long as it's consensual, so long as it's amongst adults. That's not my purview, and I feel pretty strongly about that. I also feel pretty strongly that, dropping clickbait headlines on the days of earnings releases and really suggesting something but not having anything to prove it is a dangerous place for journalism to be.
Is that what you mean by when you say shoddy journalism?
Yeah, I think shoddy journalism is bad for women.
Can you elaborate on that?
Because I think, if you look at and there's obviously not a whole lot we can get into with it, but when you look at the BI case, what happened with BI is that there was a story written. The story was very, very salacious. And it was written in a way that was titillating. But when you looked at what happened is when pieces of the story were shown to be factually inaccurate, they were not corrected.
And you mean by when Dave responded?
Yes, they are factual inaccuracies in the story that were never corrected. And what's hard about that is when a publication puts out a story and they put out sources that contribute to a story and they don't tell the whole story and they leave the source to hang out there, I think that's very dangerous because it's refuting the truth. And I think that that's important for journalists. If you want to write opinion, write opinion. We're in the opinion business. Love that. But if you're going to be in the business of journalism, I think that's very different.
Stephanie, when I first led into this question, I talked about audiences and the reason and how you lead a company that has a certain type of audience. And the reason I asked that is because if you take a look at Barstool's audience, for example, they are very quick to defend Dave, right? They love their leader. The WWE is obviously a very different type of company, but it's a very similar type of, I almost want to say cult following, right? Where people love their personalities, they love your family. When something comes up in the press that's not exactly the way you think it should be reported or you think it's true, how do you handle that? And going back to the leading as a woman thing, is there a perspective you bring as a woman with those types of situations?
Great questions. So just to set the table in terms of our audience, it is a multi-generational audience. On linear, it is skewing a little bit older. On digital and social platforms, it is much younger. And a good significant chunk of that younger audience are also gamers, right? 85% of our audience self-identifies as gamers, which I realize is not your question, but I'm just sort of setting this.
Love it, though.
We have a very, very passionate fan base. I wouldn't say they love my family necessarily. I think, my father certainly is known as being the creator and the founder, but I grew up with my mom as the CEO. So I never saw gender as an issue. I just assumed women should be CEO. It wasn't until I got older that, I started to experience different things, myself and with my peers, et cetera. But I've never seen gender as an issue. I've been the lone female in a lot of rooms and with a lot of big, very masculine, macho personalities, and it's never intimidated me. I don't really know why. I don't know if that's just because that's how I grew up or just what, but also I know these men, and they're incredible. And they've never been jerks to me. They've always treated me really well. If anything, they've always made sure I had the opportunity to voice my opinion. So I was really lucky that way. It's not always that way for everybody. And I do think diversity of thought is important in any major decision that you're making. So yes, I do think women bring a different perspective. I think different life experiences bring perspective. I think different ethnicities bring perspective because you have those different life experiences that you can bring to the table. I think it's important to have as much diversity in thought as possible when you're making these bigger decisions. In terms of the news and the press, if there's something negative, it depends on what it is. It's hard to have a blanket answer for that. But you always want to be smart in your response. You always want to know what the facts are, what the truth is, and you make your decisions accordingly.
We are heading out of the heavy part of this interview, thank goodness.
We started, so I was going to make a joke about the chairs because it makes a noise, and then we started so serious. I was like, I can't make that joke.
You can make the jokes now. You can make the jokes now. But I have one last thing before we get there, which is COVID. 2 years ago today is when I first got the email from my company that we were going to work from home for 2 weeks. That changed. WWE is really interesting. I think you're the only major, sort of entertainment sports brand that didn't shut down production. How did you do that? And how did you make that call?
So the call was made by our chairman and CEO, Vince McMahon, and it was never a question of if, but how. How were we going to continue to entertain our fans, especially in given light of the circumstance? Everyone was scared. No one knew what was happening in the world. It was just this time. We all lived through it. And we made it a point. We wanted to make sure we had content for people to have some kind of levity, some kind of escape. We didn't even mention the word COVID during our programming. It surfaced on my feed as a callback to the first SmackDown with no fans on Friday night on Fox, and it was my husband again, and he was opening the show, and what he said was something to the effects of, given everything that's happening in the world, again, not mentioning what it was, we hope that we can provide a little bit of entertainment for you. And then he gave this like this, and then we panned over to empty seats. We panned an empty crowd, and then we started the show. And we had a lot of fun with it at first. My husband was doing commentary, camera work, he was just trying to make it fun, right? Because a show with no fans for WWE is not as entertaining, not as fun, not as good. But we never stopped. We produced live programming since day one, and then we evolved. It took us a few months. We were hoping we'd be back to live event touring, but we weren't. So we took up residency at the Amway Center, and we did a partnership with the Famous Group. And we brought in nearly 1,000 virtual screens in the arena, and they were stacked in the rows back. So it really did feel like a live audience. And we produced a special for our partners in India with only Indian fans. This technology was really remarkable. It also allowed us to test with things like drone cameras, pyro, lasers. Augmented reality was our big key takeaway. I mean, we have doubled down and invested in AR in our programming. And then, ultimately, we were able to WrestleMania last year. We were, limited capacity. Luckily, we were following on the heels of the Super Bowl in the same venue at Raymond James Stadium in Tampa. And now here we are, headed to WrestleMania, April 2nd and 3rd in just a few short weeks, back at AT&T Stadium, and we're going to be full capacity for 2 nights, and it's exciting. And
Wow.
we started live event touring in the middle of July this year.
What did the removal of live events mean for your business?
Oh, it was terrible for our business, but the production costs were offset. So we didn't have a tremendous loss that way. Because the production WWE produces its own shows. Unlike a lot of other leagues where the network partners produce their content, we produce our own content. So we were saving a lot of those costs until we invested in what we called the Thunderdome, that virtual experience.
Yep. I want to get back to you about some of your streaming experiences, but before I do, let's go to Erica. So during the pandemic, obviously, we didn't have live sports, right? We had so many new experimentation with digital technologies, whether it was live audio or live podcasts. What was the big business shift for Barstool during that time? What was the big bet that you took?
We made a bunch of bets. So when Barstool started, and to this day, when someone comes to Barstool, you're really given 3 things. You're given a laptop, you're given access to the blog, and you have your cell phone. And we have built a juggernaut company on those 3 things. We don't have huge studios. We hardly have cameras that work. The mics and the audio sucks. It's kind of a ragtag operation that became our brand. Not by strategy, but because we were trying to do so much with so many people, and we didn't have a lot of money. When I got to Barstool, I think we had $2 million in the bank, and I was trying to make payroll and pay for our first big office, and we just had to do things on the cheap. But what that did for us, it put the emphasis on people's creativity and the creation of content that was based on opinion, not on rights, based on frequency, not on production value, and based on creativity. So Big Cat, who's one of the most beloved Barstool personalities, he created a fake fat football coach named Coach Doug's, who played Madden on Twitch. And we had 70,000 to 90,000 people 3 nights a week watching Big Cat play Madden with Coach Doug's. We then found a large, big guy from Florida who looked just like Coach Doug's, and we hired him and now call him Coach Doug's. But that was one thing we invented. Dave started day trading. And, in one part he was mocking day trading, and in one part he was actually day trading. I remember a day he pulled out a Scrabble bag and was like, I'm just gonna buy stocks based on whatever chits come out of the bag. He then became the voice of retail investors. So we pivoted everything to be from home, self-produced. Our podcasts continued, our video shows continued, we started streaming a lot, and we kept the office open. So, one of the things I think that's very similar in our companies is just the DNA of delivering for your fans. We had an obligation to keep the lights on, keep the content running, because people really needed an escape. People will always need an escape. And we were able to build a lot of revenue around that. We had our best year ever in 2020, and then we beat it in 2021.
And I believe that was like $200 million in revenue, right?
That's right.
So you are all about empowering your creators to be on all these platforms. Get on TikTok, get on Twitter, get on Instagram. WWE is a little different, right? Like, I think you have more boundaries around what you're going to allow some of your talent to do or say. Why is that, and what are those boundaries?
Well, we do want our talent to be their own brands, and they understand that they're businessmen and women, right? And that they're responsible for helping to build their own platforms across digital and social media. So we do train them and teach them, how to use these various platforms. And, in some cases, we have some barriers to avoid said incidents like the ones you were mentioning in the beginning of this interview. There has been, we always say to our talent when it comes to social media, like, imagine it like it's a national interview, right? A global interview. This is live. Nothing you do on social media is private. Even if it's a private account, et cetera, it can always get out. And if you have that mentality, it's helpful. But again, for the most part, our talent utilized the platform incredibly well, and I think that's one of the reasons why, on YouTube, we're the 7th most viewed overall channel in the world, 7th. We're the #1 sports channel on YouTube, #1 sports property on TikTok. We do trend on Twitter every week. 9 out of the top 15 most followed female athletes in the world are WWE superstars. So I think our talent do utilize the platforms in great ways. They're truly building their brands and helping build the WWE brand as well.
Let's talk about platforms for a second. WWE, I remember writing this in like 2017, had the 5th most subscribers to any streaming platform in America. Fast forward, you no longer have your own streaming platform, but you are licensing all of your content to Peacock, which is NBC's streaming platform, reportedly for $1 billion, although I know you will not confirm that. Can you talk to me about the decision to not be a distributor yourselves and to instead focus on content and licensing it out?
Absolutely, and to do that, I think we need to take a step back. So WWE's always been a first mover in terms of distribution. And when you think about all the way back to WrestleMania 1, WWE, Vince McMahon always wanted to bring our product directly to our fans. What was the best way to do that? WrestleMania was our version of the Super Bowl, and how were we going to bring that content to our fans? And we did closed-circuit television experiences in addition to live events, and ultimately, some have credited Vince McMahon with pioneering the pay-per-view industry, right? And so then you look at, we always want to be slightly ahead of the curve. So then as technology was evolving, we started to look at doing our own channel. And we were investigating a linear channel. We were negotiating. We actually we were in the red line of a deal that took us 2 years to get to. And at the last minute, we said, hang on a second, because they wanted to lock our rights up for 10 years. And we said, let's do some more research. We want to understand this a little bit more. The world has changed, and we found that our fans were 5 times more likely to consume online video, which was a big indicator to us, right? And so we realized we had the opportunity to control our own destiny, and that's when we launched WWE Network, which was D2C, OTT, 8 years ago. So it was really Netflix, Hulu, WWE Network, and we learned a lot during that time. We learned, that trying to get people to subscribe for 6 months versus doing sort of a monthly turnover didn't work as well.
Oh, interesting. Why?
Because people didn't want to be locked up. They still would opt in, but they wanted it to be their choice. That's the takeaway. But we also realized, as you now get closer to where we are today, right, with the likes of Disney and Apple and Netflix and everybody else, we're not a technology company. And we couldn't now, in the proliferation of all of these different D2C channels, right? It seems like everybody has their own streaming business now. And we didn't want to be competitive in the technology space. We wanted to focus on what we do best, which is storytelling. So now domestically, we license our content to Peacock. And we are taking a similar approach internationally, though WW Network does still operate in a lot of territories around the world, but we did just announce a partnership with Disney Hotstar in Indonesia as well.
I wanted to follow up on that. Are there plans to do new partnerships with other streaming services abroad? And are those experiments for one day where you could put your US rights?
At this point, I think experimentation is an awesome word to use, and I think that's where we all are today, right? That's what this technology enables for everyone, to be able to test and learn. That's what Erica was talking about as well. You can't be afraid to try new things, right? No matter how different they may seem, no matter how counterintuitive they may seem, give it a try. And your fans will tell you, your consumers will tell you if they like it, if they don't like it, they really will.
What are they telling you about Peacock? Do they like it?
They do like it, certainly from the numbers that we've been able to help drive. We have seen a massive increase in our viewership and our numbers. It's been successful for us. I think, fans are never totally satisfied with the viewing experience, especially from, a technical standpoint on any platform. So everyone's continuing to evolve and iterate. But I think for the most part, they're very happy. Because they also get, it's not just WWE content, and that was another piece for us. Because, WWE Network was $9.99. And it was harder for us to be competitive and offer lower price points. But we wanted to make sure when we did this deal that we were providing a better value for our fan base. And that's what they got. So for $9.99, you can have the full experience plus all of the other incredible content that Peacock has to offer. Or you can do a $4.99 version that's ad-supported and still get all of the incredible content in addition to WWE Network. So you're getting so much more added value, whether it's the Olympics, the Super Bowl, everything that Peacock covers.
Just out of curiosity, what is the other type of content that your audience tends to like having access to? Is it other sports? Because you guys are entertainment, right? You're scripted. So
Right.
Is it other scripted shows? What do they like?
Our fans are consumers. They love content. We over-index for horror, for comedy, for drama, for sitcom, you name it. They love it. And that's actually, without giving away any of Peacock's information, WWE's audience is very sticky. They hang around. They do watch a lot of this other content, which is great for the platform as well.
Talking about rights, Barstool's name always comes up in whether Barstool will ever get interested in sports rights and live. You say you guys are more opinion and commentary. What's your take on that? Is that something you think you guys would ever be interested in?
Yeah, we had a bunch of conversations with Major League Baseball. Obviously, they would deny that, but it did happen. Saved ourselves $85 million. But I think that, look, rights holders like the WWE are in a great place. People who make IP, people who hold the rights to things that are live are in the pole position, right? Live is incredible because you don't know what's going to happen. Why is Barstool Sports incredible? Because you don't know what's going to happen. And that's part of what keeps us so addictive and interesting is you never really know what any of us are going to do, but you know we're going to be talking about it. You don't know what's going to happen at the end of WrestleMania, but you want to, and you want to be talking about it as a fan. We did a partnership with the Arizona Bowl. So the Arizona Bowl, which is a bowl game that happens on New Year's Eve each year. We were supposed to have the first Arizona Bowl game this past December 31st. Originally, we had just sponsored it, right? We said, we'll be the title sponsor of the Arizona Bowl. We'll call it the Barstool Sports Arizona Bowl. It was supposed to be broadcast on CBS. CBS is like, there is no way I'm giving Barstool the airtime and the promotion, so we will not let it be on CBS. And Dave and I said, great, we'll air it on Barstool. Now, to be honest with you, I think that was a stupid move because think about how much promotion Barstool would give to CBS to go watch this bowl game. Instead, what you will see us do this next New Year's Eve is cover a college football event in a way that no one has ever covered it. We'll broadcast it on our platforms. We'll cover it the way we want to cover it. We will create humor and comedy and entertainment around, a marquee event in a way that hasn't been done before, in a way that could never happen on a big 3 broadcast network. So you'll see us do that. You'll see us do some other things in college basketball. And then eventually, could we, I think one of the places the world is going to go is that sports leagues and team owners need fans. And fans come from the WWE. Barstool Sports has a lot of fans. Distribution and social platforms have fans. What I think you're going to see over time is that the way sports is consumed is more personalized, right? You look at the Manning cast. Why couldn't you have a Dave Portnoy Big Cat cast, right? And so you think about one set of rights, one camera showing one event on a field can be covered by one person, 5 people, or 100 different commentators. And I think we will do very, very well in that environment. And certainly when it makes sense, we'll write the check to get rights.
And just to push you a little bit further on that, what are the types of sports that you think make the most sense? Obviously, you've had those conversations with MLB. You're talking about college basketball.
Yeah, look, Penn National owns a 36% stake in Barstool Sports. So we're interested in sports that people want to bet on. Football, basketball, baseball, hockey. We're also interested in our own sports, right? We created a brand called Rough and Rowdy, which is really an amateur boxing contest between people who really don't know how to box and just kind of like maul around a ring for a little bit. Very different than the WWE, but great. So we'll also create our own rights. And I think that's really the future, is when you see, do you have an audience? Can you create something that has suspense and drama and is must watch? Can you cover it in a way that brings additional people along for the ride? And can you splice it up and distribute it in social media in a way that increases your reach and increases your engagement? And that's going to be the future of live sports.
I want to hold the college piece of that.
Okay.
Because I know we all have thoughts on that. But before I do, I wanted to come back to what you were talking about, spanning all generations in your audience at WWE. Obviously, you guys have a strong presence on linear, strong on social. What are you doing to help, however, continue to lure that younger audience in? Are you thinking about new types of programming, new types of shows? And even if it's not younger, what are you doing to appeal to more women, et cetera?
Absolutely. Well, the whole women's evolution that's happened in our business has, really helped bring better storytelling, because I think women love the stories. And this is, I don't want to just pander and say men love this, women love that. But it's made our product better. And I think in terms of multi-generational, so you have to tell great, compelling stories with characters that resonate. We have over 200 different types of characters who resonate with the audience for different reasons. You have to create an emotional connection with your audience. That's the number one thing. Maya Angelou says, and I'll butcher this slightly, but people will never remember what you said. They'll never remember what you did, but they will always remember how you made them feel. If you can make people feel, that's when you really have a connection that is going to last. So for WWE, we have stories that resonate at multiple levels. If you think about, a Disney movie, you can watch that as a family, and the parents will get different jokes differently than the kids will. It's, just a layered version, more sophisticated type storytelling. So we try to do that with our product in the ring. In addition to that, we produce a ton of content that is not in ring. So, for example, documentaries. We just announced a new partnership a continued partnership with A&E for over 130 hours of programming. And that was based on a prior partnership that was so successful that we were able to move forward and expand that. Netflix is doing a 4-part docuseries on Vince, on my father, which is really equal parts exciting and scary, at the same time. Also, we announced with Blumhouse Productions, Vince McMahon or the United States of America versus Vince McMahon, which was basically my high school experience when my father was sued by the federal government and ultimately won. But we also produce animated content. We also have, a partnership with Nickelodeon. We cast our stars there. We look at younger digital social influencers, TikTok influencers. We bring them to our events. We pair them with our talent. We do duets. We do all of those things. And of course, gaming, as I mentioned before, is a huge pathway to that next-gen audience. And sorry.
Would you guys create your own games?
So we have our partner for our console game with Take-Two Interactive. So 2K22 just launched this past Friday, and we've seen really positive, strong results, which is awesome, and it seems like our fans are really excited about this game. The prior launch, the prior game that it took us a couple years to correct, was not as good. At all. It had a lot of glitches, a lot of bugs. It was not a good experience for anyone, and we doubled down with our partner to make this game the best game that it can possibly be, and of course we're going to continue to iterate and develop and grow. But that's not it. We also have mobile gaming platforms. We have, when you think about the metaverse and the opportunities that it can potentially provide, it's all about what WWE is about. It's about shared experiences. It's about bringing people together. I watch my 13-year-old daughter, and she loves Minecraft. And she's on her headset talking to her friends, and they're having so much fun playing together in Minecraft. And that's the piece. It's that connection point. It's bringing people together. And that's how Next Gen is accustomed to communicating. That's how they get together. That's how they have fun, in addition to doing other activities. But that's a main point. So we need to be there.
It's interesting hearing you lay out all these different opportunities, especially in licensing. You guys hired Nick Khan as your president. A little while ago, he came from the Creative Arts Agency, so he knows a lot about rights and contracts and stuff like that. What does hiring someone like that say about the future of your organization and trying to pursue all these different platforms?
Well, I think it's a true indicator that we're a media company that's here to stay and here to grow. Nick has been a force of nature in WWE. He's been an excellent president, not only in terms of media rights negotiations, which he helped us do prior to obviously becoming our president, but just his view of the company, of how we can be more efficient, breaking down silos, bringing people together, functioning truly as a team. It's all about WWE. It's not about, oh, I own this, or oh, I own that, and therefore I'm not going to share, or I don't want your opinion, or whatever it is. It's like, no, we don't have time for any of that. We got to go. So we all have to be working together.
And last question on this front, WWE is a massive company, right? You're publicly traded, $4 billion company, but it's also a lot bigger than it was several years ago. You guys seem to be hitting your stride. There have been reports that someone might want to come out and buy WWE, right? Like a Disney would buy WWE. Do you guys like being a public company? Do you want to continue that route, or would you entertain an opportunity for someone to take you private for a gajillion dollars?
For a gajillion dollars, we would absolutely entertain any option.
Yes.
It's always a good answer.
I think the thing, though, just to add to it, though, which is what's really interesting about WWE is that...
And Erica sits on their board.
I'm on the board of WWE, totally biased. But WWE gets no credit for the sophistication that this company has. When you think about live event creation, live event programming, this is a company that has thousands and thousands, tens of thousands of hours of programming. They are manipulating that to create the perfect crowd noise, the perfect pyrotechnic, the perfect storyline. They are micromanaging down to the wrestling move, the toss, the throw, the dialogue. They micromanage their production down to a fractional level, which shows you the level of care in the IP. And I think what's really interesting about that is when you put that level of care, you can appeal to a 9-year-old and you can appeal to a 50-year-old. And then what's also interesting is when you look at most rights holders, it's highly perishable content, right? Sports rights. You know who won the Super Bowl. Maybe you'll go back and watch it. You send an 11-year-old kid to WrestleMania. They'll watch WrestleMania. Certain superstars will appeal more than others. And then they will go watch tens of thousands of hours on YouTube because they don't know. It's all new content. And so this is where the WWE is so well positioned, is they have a content library that's massive, that's readily accessible. They have fresh content, which is premium and mass broadcast via Peacock. And then they have all of the characters woven throughout. So I think about the companies of the future will have those three things: deep content library, great storytelling, personalities who you love, and even more importantly, you'll hate. And then the ability to bring a fan throughout that, to get the belt, to wear the t-shirt, to have the toy, to play the game, like that's the name of the game.
And thank you, Erica, and I'll
You'll pay me later.
I'll pay you later. But not only that, right? It's also the opportunity to go so much deeper, because while fans may not watch a Super Bowl, over and over again, they will watch matches.
All the time.
They rewatch them all the time. All of our data will show you that. Actually, the historical content is second to the premium live event experience in terms of what our fans are really looking for. At least that was what the research, showed in terms of WWE Network. But also, they'll then recreate it. So whether it's stop motion animation with action figures, whether it's creating stadiums in Minecraft, whether it's going on these fan boards and writing fantasy storylines. I mean, they are so engaged, and that's another thing that I love so much about the future is what we're trying to figure out right now, and we're working with Blockchain Creative Labs with Fox for our NFT business, but is how can we put our IP in the hands of our fans? So how can we encourage and empower them, not only our talent, but our fan base to create? We want to see what they want to do with our brand. Mm-hmm. And then they may even have the opportunity to monetize that.
Mm-hmm. An anecdote on the fandom. I will say as a reporter, it's wild to cover the WWE because there is no more crowdsourced coverage of any entertainment company than there is of the WWE. You don't have like massive fan blocks for Comcast. Sorry, NBC people in the room, like you do WWE. Let's talk about college. We have just a few minutes left. Name, image, and likeness is a huge opportunity for sports brands, for entertainment brands. Would love to hear what both of your plans are for this. And then also, if you could just touch on like college female athletes, since we're here talking about women in sports. Erica, you want to go first?
Great, sure. So we launched Barstool Athletes, I don't know, maybe 6 months ago, 7 months ago. Same deal, launched entire business off a tweet. We have 140,000 athletes signed to Barstool Athletes, which is pretty insane. We don't pay them. We send them a sweatshirt that says Barstool Athletes. They can put the brand in their bio, and we feature them on our Instagram feeds. When you look at what's happening with NIL, you have a lot of companies coming to the forefront saying, I'm going to pick the top 0.02% of athletes and I'm going to build a big business on them. We're taking a very different approach, which is a very Barstool approach, which is if you had every field hockey player in every college in America and you marshaled them to do something for good or to promote a product or to build a brand, we will be able to do that, right? We have 25% plus of all athletes in this country signed, which is insane.
Wow, yeah.
Now think about the possibilities of that. What does this company know how to do? This company knows how to make stars. This company knows how to grow social following. This company knows how to make media, podcasts, videos, social series. Name, image, and likeness and the success of athletes is all going to be built on their social. That is the name of the game. Their performance will be important. Their personality will be important. The thing that's really going to be important is how big is their following and how good of a personality are they? Can they compel someone to buy something, wear something, do something, watch something? And that's where we're in a really strong spot. And what we will do is, my goal is to put $1 million in the hands of college athletes. We're not going to take the 0.02%. We're going to take this fall offensive linemen, which would actually be the great name of a series. Like you could do a lot with that. But how do we take football players? How do we take female athletes? How do we take basketball players? How do we take D3 players versus D1 players? It doesn't matter. How do we take 18, 19, 20, 21-year-olds, make them stars, have them build a following, give them our tools, and help them make money and create value for Barstool?
What if you're a shy person but a great athlete?
Well, that's great. You're just not going to make a lot of money.
Okay, fair. What's WWE's NIL plan?
So for WWE, we of course rebranded NIL to be next in line because for us, it's a recruitment tool. Not only can we also help amplify all of these different athletes, individual brands, and help give them tools, but also we're providing them an extra step in their career. A lot of athletes, where are they going to go if you're a track and field athlete and you're not going to make it to the Olympics? Where are you going to go if you're a hammer thrower? Even making it to the NFL, it's a very, very small percentage of football players who actually make it to the NFL. But they're all athletes. The talent we're choosing all have big personalities, big followings. How can we help provide them an extra step on their career and extend their athletic career? WWE is the perfect way to do that. And they have the opportunity to train and to learn the craft while they're still in school. And then once they're out of school, hopefully they come on board and become a WWE superstar. And if they don't, that's okay, because we've helped develop and grow them and gave them tools that they can then take with them. So it really is a win-win. And the first NIL player that we announced is Gable Steveson, who is, of course, Olympic gold medalist. Won this year. He's number one in the country. He's amazing. Hopefully you'll be seeing him soon.
Oddly, the wrestlers have huge personalities.
Oddly. Shocking.
Wrestlers are
Not only the wrestlers, though, and you asked about the women. The women have the biggest social followings.
I was going to ask about that just out of curiosity. Like, which type of women athletes go on to do really well in like a WWE setting? Are they the ones that did team sports, or are they people like, I see they look like gymnasts sometimes doing flips in the ring. Like, what types of athletes do well as female WWE?
It's really runs the gamut. It spans the gamut. Yes, I think gymnasts it's a more natural alignment in terms of body control, because a lot of what we do in the ring is performance art, and it requires a lot of body control to know how to fall, how to land, how to take certain maneuvers or give them. But whether, Bianca Belair was a track and field star. So we have, we signed the Cavender twins, who are basketball players. We have Alexa Bliss was a gymnast, but it really runs the gamut. It doesn't come from just one sport.
As a competitive walker myself, I look forward to one day at the
Absolutely.
So we're running out of time. Just have a question for both of you. You both have daughters. Like, what's the one thing you admire a lot about your daughters? I think yours is a little bit younger. Yours are teens, early teens. Like, what do you admire about them and their generation of women?
Oh, I love that question.
Me too.
That's an awesome question. I love women in general. Like, 20-something women blow my mind right now. Like, the difference in being a 40-something woman versus 20-something women is night and day. Who they think they are, the confidence they have, the assurance, what they're looking for in a partner is incredible. When I think about my daughter, I think what's amazing about kids right now is they think about being a citizen of the world almost first and foremost before being an American or being the idea of being connected to something bigger, the idea of being kind, the idea of being part of a bigger whole is really just intrinsic to I think what a preteen is, and then just so expressive. This is a generation that, TikTok is so prevalent, and I'm like, get off the TikTok. Like, no twerking on TikTok is a common phrase in our house, which I stand by. But just the idea of the theatrics and being free to express yourself and being comfortable that may be on camera and still being assured and having intrinsic value despite that.
I admire that too.
Wholeheartedly agree. So I have 3 daughters. They're 15, 13, and 11. And they amaze me and inspire me and blow me away every single day with their confidence, with their savvy, with their understanding of things, with the questions that they ask. They're very thoughtful, and they all are so different. My oldest daughter at one point went out for the cheer team. She is not a gymnast at all, and she just wanted to go do something that inspired her. And 0 background. And she went out there alone, didn't know anybody. This was in a completely different place, a little bit away from our town, and she went out and she did it. My middle daughter decided she wanted to go out for the football team. Never played football before. It was flag football. She was the only girl on the team, and she went out there and she did it. And she kicked ass. And she was the fastest one on that field. And she can catch and throw and everything else. And she might play in high school, so we're having that conversation now. And my youngest daughter just did beauty school dropout in Greece. She sang that role, and she owned that stage, and she owned that moment, and it just makes me so proud to see them be their full selves and not to have that insecurity that I think a lot of teenage girls, at least when I was growing up, at least myself, experienced. You know, it is a different time, and I agree, they are citizens of the world. They're always trying to raise money for Connor's Cure. They're always doing different things that matter. My middle child's like a total environmentalist. We compost and do everything that I never knew how to do. But so it's just amazing. It's amazing.
Part of the reason why I asked is because you're also a different generation of moms who think that's amazing and who embrace it. I have the world's best mom, personally, but she's in her 70s, right? And she doesn't have the same outlook that you guys do. And so I think it's just interesting to hear how much you admire that in your kids. Quickly before we wrap, I work at a company called Axios. If you haven't heard of us, we write really short and we do fun bullet point takeaways. And so I figured I could share with you a few takeaways from this just to help you, have some thoughts as we leave the room. I thought what Stephanie said, that 85% of their audience is gamers, is super important. I think of WWE as a thing like my dad's obsessed with, but obviously that's multi-generational. And then I also love what you said about getting into NFTs. I mean, not only does that speak to the youth audience, but also giving your audience ownership of the content was super interesting to me. Erica, I'm glad that we tackled some of that stuff with Dave. It's helpful as a journalist to hear your perspective on where you think Insider got it wrong, and how that impacts the brand. But obviously, that's just like one tiny little piece of everything that Barstool's accomplishing. $200 million a year business, getting into athletes, getting into philanthropy, the Barstool difference. Looking forward to seeing what comes of that. I'm very curious to see how your deal with Peacock goes. Thought it was interesting that you said that the people who are WWE subscribers are very sticky for Peacock, and they come and they watch a ton of different stuff. Erica, I love that you guys are an opinion-based content company, not necessarily rights, but it doesn't mean you won't dabble. And you did save yourself $85 million a year, let's be real.
Thank you.
And then, just kind of the last big takeaway I had talking to the both of you is that, I think both of you recognize the power of technology to evolve. And even though you are both women in media and women in sports media, you're both women in technology too. And I don't want to forget that as we have these conversations. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Thanks to everyone. Thanks to everyone at WWE, Matt and Chris and that whole team, Stephanie. Thanks to everyone at Barstool, Jacqueline, for making this happen. And we hope to see you next year.
Great. Thanks,
Thank
Sarah.
you.
Great. Thank you.